Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikhil from Zerodha, and today we have with us Mr. Kalpin Parekh, Joint President of DSP BlackRock Investment Managers. Kalpin has been in the industry for over 19 years, and he was previously managing sales and marketing at the HDFC Mutual Funds. And he has also served time in Birla Sun Life Asset Management and ICICI Pru, right? He originally started his career with L&T Finance Limited, and now he's with DSP BlackRock as joint president, right? So Kalpin holds a master's degree in management studies in finance from Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies, as well as bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Bharati Vidyapeeth, Pune, right? So over to you, Kalpesh. If you could walk our viewers through debt funds, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, everyone, and uh, glad to be with all of you on this afternoon. The context and the topic of debt funds or fixed income funds, as we call it, is very, very relevant at this point in time, mainly because of two things. One, interest rates have come down secularly over the last 3 years in India. So there were times 3 years back when bond yields were around 9%, and even fixed deposits were yielding between 9 to 10%. These fixed deposits have moved down now to around 6 to 7%. Post demonetization, which happened in November, a lot of money has moved into the banking system, and which has led to banks bringing down their deposit rates. So as consumers of fixed deposits or as investors in fixed deposits, your opportunity to make money out of fixed deposits or to earn a reasonable rate of return has come down. With FD rates at 6.5 to 7%, and on top of it, if you adjust for the full tax, the marginal tax that you have to pay on FDs, effective return for an investor drops to 4.5 to 5%. In that context, fixed income funds play a very big role because they are nothing but alternative to bank deposits, government bonds, alternative to company deposits, corporate deposits, tax-free bonds, combination of all of this. And if you invest in a certain manner with a time horizon of 3 years and above, you can make your returns far more tax efficient. Your effective tax rate can drop to as low as 0 to around 10%. The mutual fund industry, which is around 18 lakh crores, and all of you would be reading a lot about how the industry has grown in the last couple of years, more so in the last few months and quarters. In its 18 lakh crores assets that we manage, roughly around 6 lakh crores belongs to equity as an asset class, and almost 12 lakh crores is towards debt funds. So I want to use this opportunity to highlight to all of you that mutual fund is not only about equities. Mutual fund also caters to significant needs of every investor in terms of managing the debt pool of assets as well. So there are funds which can be replacement to your savings account, where if you want to keep money for just 2 or 3 or 4 days over the weekend, parking, short-term parking, liquid funds help you fulfill that objective. There are funds which are replacement to fixed deposits. There are funds which are replacement to government bonds. So fixed income funds cater to a wide variety of traditional products that you as investors have been used to so far. And if you understand more about them, you can actually, without changing your risk profile, keeping your needs for safety and liquidity the same, actually increase your returns on the debt part of your portfolio significantly by taking the help of tax efficient debt funds. The second point I want to highlight is inflation also in the last couple of years from 9 to 10% has dropped down to around 5%. It hovers between 4 to 5%, which is the CPI, the consumer price inflation. And Reserve Bank has been making a lot of effort to focus on keeping inflation under control. In that context, when consumer price inflation is 4 to 5%, and if we see over the last few years, fixed income funds have generated returns in the band of 7 to 9%, depending on time horizon and which part of the cycle you have invested in, there is a meaningful positive real rate of return that we as fixed income investors have been able to earn. And hence, it's a very a smart way of investing, which as investors, we are very happy to guide you and share with you. So that's my brief on the opportunity in fixed income, what role it can play. It can replace your savings account, it can replace fixed deposits for you, it can replace your bond investments, and it can give you safety, liquidity, along with better post-tax returns. We as Indians, like every opportunity to save tax. So at DSP BlackRock, what we believe is, as good citizens, it's our duty to pay tax, which is legitimate. At the same time, as a good citizen for our family and ourselves, we should use every opportunity to save tax legitimately. And debt funds help you to make your taxation very efficient, especially when your investments are 3 years and above. The advantage of multiple indexation ensures that your taxable returns go up significantly, or your tax rate, effective tax rate, comes down significantly. So that's the broad framework that I've shared with you, and I'll be happy to answer questions and take it forward.
So Kalpin, one of
Yes.
our users has a question. So he says right now 45% of his entire portfolio is in debt funds, right?
Okay.
So what should be the ideal allocation? I mean, could you
Okay.
give us an idea of
Sure.
how you allocate your like
Okay.
parts of the portfolio and
Yeah.
how much of it is debt funds and
Okay.
equities?
So I'll tell you, there are different theories around what should be asset allocation. And these are theories. What is important is practically how does one look at it. And I'll give you my own example. How do I allocate? See, ideally, your investment should be a function of what do you want to achieve with that investment? What need do you want it to fulfill? What is your temperament and attitude towards fluctuation of the capital? So one framework is as follows. As Indians, we have lots of money in fixed deposit. um, why do we like fixed deposits? Because returns are fixed upfront. You know on day one what return are you going to earn over the next 3 4 years. Number one. And number two, you have a reasonably high a degree of certainty, as long as the fixed deposit does not belong to a bank which defaults. So if you are in a reasonable bank, you know that the money is going to come back. Now, the first thing is, I would tell people is that do not keep anything in fixed deposits, because if you are in your highest tax bracket or even in the 20% tax bracket, by investing in debt mutual funds, which themselves invest in the same fixed deposits that you as consumers are investing in, or by investing in certain bank bonds and public sector bonds, you get similar return as the fixed deposit, but you end up paying between 0 to 10% tax. So in that construct, if you are a fixed deposit investor, it makes sense to just move everything to short-term bond funds, or banking debt funds, or banking and PSU bond funds. There are various products like that. The second approach to decide how much should I be in a debt fund is a function of how much volatility and what time horizon you have. So personally, my view is, over long periods of time, the best asset class in terms of wealth creation has been equity. Equity has its cycles of going up and down. So over time, the direction of equity markets is always up. But intermittently, there are years when equity markets go nowhere or go down as well. And generally, equity markets, after they've gone up a lot, tend to go slow or pause. So I would say that if you have money more than 5 years and above, uh, there the allocation towards equity can be higher. But if you have money which is less than 5 years, if your requirement for taking capital back is within the next 2 3 4 or 5 years, then fixed income funds play a very big role, because they do not have the fluctuations that you see in equity as an asset class, and they give you stability of returns. They give you reasonable predictability of what returns you can make. So keeping that in mind, if your time horizon is less than 5 years, all your money should be in fixed income funds. If your time horizon is more than 5 years, then you should have money in fixed income and in equity. Now, there are two approaches from here on. If your horizon is longer, and I'll give you my real life example. My younger brother has all his money in equity. He says that I want to only build my future wealth. My time horizon is 7 8 10 20 years. So if equity over time is known to give 1.5 to 2 times higher return than fixed income as per past 25, 30 years of track record, then I rather stay invested in equity funds. My approach is, I have a moderate risk temperament. I do not like too much of fluctuations in my capital value. And hence, I try to keep 50 to 75% of my portfolio in equities, and the balance 25 to 50% goes into fixed income through debt funds. The exposure is on the lower side, which is 25% to fixed income when equity markets are very low, because that is the time to invest in equity markets. For example, right now equity markets are on a high; they are doing very well, but already a lot of returns have come. So maybe in the next few years they may, slow down a bit, and hence I've increased my exposure towards fixed income funds. So this framework is a function of your time horizon and your uh, appetite to digest fluctuations. What I tell investors is, equity as an asset class, while it will give you always the best return, but that best return or the highest return will come over a 7, 8, 10-year cycle. Intermittently, every 2 years, equity mutual funds see a 10 to 15% correction in NAV. Every 5 years, there is a 25 to 30% correction. Every 8 years, there is a 50% fall in stock prices and 30-40% fall in NAVs of mutual equity funds. If you can ignore that, and a lot of successful investors are successful because they have this temperament to accept that these price corrections are temporary. If I do not react to it, it does not matter. Over time my NAVs will only go up. Such investors tend to have higher allocation to equity, but there are very few people with that type of a temperament. Most of us panic with volatility, we panic with fluctuation, we get afraid when our portfolio value goes down and does not go for a long period of time, and then we end up making wrong decisions. So if your temperament is of not wanting too much of fluctuation in your capital, then having 50% exposure to fixed income is an advisable thing to do. So there is no single answer that whether you should be 50 or 75 or 25. Let me quote what Benjamin Graham, who is Warren Buffett's guru, what he broadly says, that on a steady state basis, any common investor like you and me should have 50 rupees in fixed income funds and 50 rupees in equity funds, uh, with a fairly long time horizon of 5 years and above. Whenever equity markets are not doing very well and their past returns are poor, shift this allocation more in favor of equity, which is 75 in equity and 25 in fixed income. Whenever equity markets are doing exceedingly well, reduce the exposure of equity because they have gone up a lot, and increase the exposure of fixed income, which means do 25 in equity and 75 in fixed income. And whenever you are in periods like today, which is, equity has done well in recent times, but over 5, 7 years, equity returns have not been very high. Then 50-50 is a reasonable allocation. So as a thumb rule, I would say in steady state, 50-50, 15 debt and 15 equity. When equity markets are cheap, be 75 in equity, 25 in debt. When debt markets are cheap and equity markets are expensive, beat 75 in debt and 25 in equity. And this rebalancing you can do once a year. Once a year, see your portfolio and see whether there is a need to rebalance. There are times you may have no need to rebalance, then let it continue. So that's my take on what should be your exposure. Having said that, there are many investors who cannot digest even a 10% fall in their capital because, again, of their lifestyles or their requirements or their time horizons. They should be only 100% in fixed income. They should not get carried away with, recency effect in other asset classes which are doing too well. So debt is about predictable returns, steady returns. So if your desire is for very steady returns, then you should have a higher exposure to debt. If your desire is a blend of steady returns and higher returns with some fluctuation, then you can digest that. Then accordingly, you allocate more towards equity as an asset class.
Right. So, Kalpin, another thing. So, what are the risks associated with debt funds? Because recently I read that Taurus AMC had a few debt funds, right? And the NAV dropped by nearly 7% in a day. So,
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
comment on that.
Good question. I like it when people don't ask only about returns but also about risk, and it's very important to recognize risk. They say that a good investor is one who is aware of what risk is he taking in investing, because there is nothing in the world which is without risk. In a way, even fixed deposits have risk. So if you're invested with fixed deposits of poor banks or cooperative banks who do not have very strong balance sheet, you run the risk of default. Now, when you invest in any debt mutual fund, remember one thing, that on a day-to-day basis, your capital is not assured, because you are the mutual fund is putting the money into underlying bonds or other deposits, and there's a concept called mark-to-market. So it's a slightly nuanced concept. So let me try to explain. There are two risks in investing in debt funds. One risk is risk of credit. It's called credit risk, and the second is called interest rate risk. Credit risk means you give money to us, we deploy money in, let's say, 15 underlying bank deposits or company deposits with a tenor of, let's say, 3 years. Now, in these 3 years, these underlying instruments are supposed to pay interest to us every 6 months. There may be a situation that some company, if they are in a sector which is going through a rough patch, it is likely that they may not be able to make the interest payment, or if they are going through a very, very bad phase, and if they have managed their business very badly, at the end of 3 years, when it is time to repay the entire capital back, they may not be in ability to repay that capital. Such an event is called default. This is an event where the credit risk is getting manifested. So, Taurus is just one example, but without taking names, in the last many years, there have been many mutual funds where the underlying debt instrument, one of the underlying debt instrument, has not been able to pay back its capital on the desired date, and because of which a credit risk has got triggered. And whenever a credit event happens, so for example, in a 100 rupee portfolio, if the mutual fund has given 3 rupees to a company in the steel sector, and the steel sector, as you know, in the last 2 years went through a very rough patch where commodity prices fell by almost 50-60%. So the steel company was not able to repay that 3 rupees at the end of 3 years, and hence defaulted. So the 100 rupee portfolio, which over 3 years assume at a 7% interest rate, should have become 121 in value, and with some amount of compounding should have become 124 rupees in value, will drop back to 121 because that 3 rupee capital has got impacted. So your return of almost 8% will come down to 7% if the default amount is restricted to the extent of 3 rupees. If the default amount is larger, the impact on your returns can be much higher. So that's one nature of risk, which is credit risk. And typically once in 3-4 years, whenever the economy goes through a rough cycle, some companies which are over leveraged, some companies which have taken too much of debt than what they should have taken, or they are in an industry which is going through a very bad patch, they tend to go through these phases of either defaults or their ratings can get downgraded. So a company may be AAA today, but 2 years from now, if they go through a rough cycle, the bond can get downgraded from AAA to AA. In that event, there is a mark-to-market downside which gets calculated, and the return can get affected to some extent. Having said that, it has never been seen that over a year or 2 or 3 years, an investor has ever lost capital because of risk of a credit event. Because typically, debt funds diversify across 25 underlying companies. So even if one or two companies go through a rough patch, the rest of the companies are doing well. And to avoid these type of events, investors who do not now credit funds are very large in the world, and credit funds in India also are a growing category. So out of the 9 lakh crore assets that 12 lakh crore assets that mutual funds have, 1 lakh crore is in credit funds. Credit funds can have these type of credit risk events. So as investors, if you want to avoid these events, you could prefer to look at the rating profile of the fund and prefer to invest in funds which have largely a AAA portfolio. There are many investors who say that, okay, if the probability of this event is once in 2 or once in 3 years to a small extent, but if I'm getting compensated by earning 1% extra return in a lower rated credit, I don't mind putting my money because I'm aware of that risk. And I'm confident that my fund manager will be able to navigate me. Then, if you believe in that framework, then you could invest in credit funds. So one way to avoid credit risk is to not buy credit funds and prefer funds which are with AAA instruments, and hope that these AAA instruments remain AAA in the life of your investment. So that's one risk. The second risk in debt fund is interest rate risk. Now, let me try to explain it to you in a slightly different way. Let's say you have invested in a fixed deposit at 8%. So you have put 100 rupees, and that 100 rupees will earn you 8 rupees every year as the predefined rate of interest. Tomorrow, few months down the line, Reserve Bank decides to cut interest rates drastically, and all interest rates in the economy are brought down. So interest rates drop to 7%, which means this any new fixed deposit will now pay only 7 rupees, which or any new bond in the bond market will only pay 7 rupees of interest and not 8 rupees of interest. In such an environment, the deposit or the bond which was paying 8% 3 months back becomes more valuable because all the new bonds in the market are available only at 7%. So the old bond becomes more valuable, and because it becomes more valuable, a lot of people seek to invest in that bond. So the price of that bond, which was 100 rupees on day one, actually will go up by 1 rupee to reflect that 1 rupee differential in interest rates. Now, this is called positive mark to market. This is the positive side of interest rate risk, that when interest rates go down, bond prices go up or deposit prices go up. When the opposite happens, Reserve Bank decides that we want to raise interest rates, and from 8%, we want to raise interest rates to 9%. In such an event, your old fixed deposit, which was earning 8 rupees, will continue to earn you 8 rupees. But all the new fixed deposits in the market will come at 9 rupees. They will pay you a coupon of 9%. Hence, your old FD becomes less attractive because it is giving you a lower interest rate or a lower interest payment. To reflect for its reduced attractiveness, its 100 rupee price will drop down to 99 rupees. Now, when the price drops down to 99 because of change in interest rates, this is the other side of mark to market, the negative side of mark to market, which is when interest rates go up, bond prices fall or deposit prices fall. So when you invest in a bond fund, and a bond fund is investing in these type of multiple such deposits, they could be bank deposits, they could be bank bonds, corporate bonds, or government of India bonds. If you've invested today when interest rates on an average are at around 7%, if few years from now interest rates from 7 go to 8 or 9, there will be a small fall in the price of these bonds to reflect this change in interest rates. This is the second risk called interest rate risk. So broadly, these are the two risks that an investor should be aware of when he is investing in debt funds. This risk is still very, very nominal. So unlike equity as an asset class where the NAVs can fall by 15, 20, 30% over a year, whenever, economy goes through a recession or there is a stock market crash, generally in bond funds, the degree of price correction is very small. And more importantly, the price may fall whenever interest rates are changed, but the price starts catching up again faster the next day onwards, because the next day onwards, your portfolio will start earning the higher rate of return. So these risks are relatively short-term in nature. Particularly the interest rate risk is short-term in nature. It catches up over time. The credit risk can be permanent in nature, because if the company has defaulted and is not able to pay back, then as an investor, you have to take a haircut and give up on that part of your capital. So these are the two broad risks that an investor should be aware of.
Right, right. So also when the dividends are declared, right? So there's a dividend distribution tax of around 28, 29%.
Yes.
So this dividend paid out after this deduction, right?
Yeah.
So is it a good idea to invest in debt funds? Because whatever is for equity funds or liquid funds, whatever dividends you get for equity funds, right? They are not
Yeah.
taxed, right?
True.
There's no such.
Yeah. So, why is it that, many investors prefer equity funds apart from the long-term prospect of wealth creation is that the dividends earned by you as an investor in your hands are tax-free. And even the mutual fund does not deduct any tax before that dividend is paid. On debt mutual funds, and there are 5 different types of debt mutual funds: liquid funds, liquid plus funds, short-term funds, credit funds, and bond funds and gilt funds. All of them, when they pay dividends, in your hands, again, the dividends are tax-free. However, before we pay dividends to you, there is a concept called dividend distribution tax, which is roughly around 28%, between 25 to 28% effectively. So we deduct that much of tax and give the money back to you. So to give you an example, if the fund has earned a return of around 8%, in the prevailing interest rate environment, when I pay this, I have to pay this return back to you as dividends. I will first deduct 28% of this 8, which will be roughly 2.2 rupees. So 8 minus 2.2, 2.2 rupees we will deduct and pay to the government as dividend distribution tax, and you will earn 5.8 in your hand. Uh, so as an investor, is it exciting to lose so much of distribution tax? The answer is no. But having said that, if you are in the highest tax bracket of 33 or 34%, compared to that, dividend is still a better option. What do we advise to investors? Uh, all the money which is 3 year and above should go to debt funds, because when you invest for 3 years, then you should not invest in the dividend option. You should invest in the growth option. 100 rupees, let's assume that the fund grows at 7% per annum. I'm using 7 because prevailing interest rates are closer to 7%. If you invest in an FD, that also will give you around 7. So how will the taxation then work? In a fixed deposit, you will earn 7 rupees in year 1, but then you have to pay 35% tax. So you end up losing 2.5 rupee. So instead of 7, you will earn 7, but you will have to pay 2.5 rupees as tax. So effectively, you will earn 4.5. So 100 becomes 104.5 in year 1. In year 2, it becomes roughly 109. In year 3, it becomes 114. I'm assuming simple interest rate for sake of simplicity right now. There will be a nominal amount of compounding also. Now, instead of that, if you invest in a bond fund or a short-term bond fund, which grows at 7%, your 100, so there is no TDS or tax deduction at source in a debt mutual fund. So 100 will become 107 in year 1. It will grow by another 7% in year 2 if more or less the interest rate environment is stable. There will be some fluctuation. The difference between a fixed deposit and a bond fund is the returns are not exactly linear. Some year you will get 7, some year you may get 6.5, some year you may get 7.5. But assuming 7 for sake of simplicity, year 2 becomes 114, and year 3 it goes to 121. However, the moment you cross 3 years, um, a very beautiful benefit of long-term gains and indexation kicks in. So the government says that as Indians, we are subject to inflation every year. Inflation is in the current environment, let's say around 6%. So while you have earned 21 rupees in your debt fund, but of these 7% that you've earned every year, 6% is eaten away by inflation every year. So 6 and 6, simplistically, let's take is 18. So out of your 21 rupees gain, 18 rupees is getting offset by inflation. Hence, for sake of taxation, the government gives you dispensation that the tax will be applied only on the balance 3 rupees, which is called the taxable gains after taking advantage of indexation. And the tax rate also for long-term capital gains for debt funds is lower at 20%. So 20% is applied on that balance 3 rupees of taxable gain, which is roughly 0.6%. So all you end up paying over the life of 3 years is zero point 0.6. So 7% minus zero point 0.6, what you earn is roughly 6.4 tax free. 6.4 tax free, if you load it up at 33% tax, is effectively 9% pre-tax. Versus that, a fixed deposit earns you 6.5 to 7% pre-tax. So here is how you decide. So ideally, one should invest in debt fund only with a 3 year and above horizon, and take advantage of indexation by investing only in the growth option. Number one. Number two, however, if you have money for, let's say, 1 month or 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, that money can be invested in liquid funds or liquid plus funds, which also tend to give you marginally higher return than what fixed deposits will give. And secondly, it has liquidity. You can take your money out within 24 hours. Your money is not at the mercy of lock-ins, provided you choose funds which do not have exit loads and lock-ins. So that's the calculation for how you can make your investments tax efficient.
Cool. So that is about it. I mean, we don't have any other questions. But before we end this, what are your recommendations for the DSP BlackRock liquid or debt funds?
Yeah. So, like I said, if your time horizon is 3 years and above, there are two very apt funds for all of you. One of them is called DSP Short Term Plan, and the other one is called DSP Banking and PSU Fund. Both of them invest in AAA instruments, which have a time horizon. These instruments are of 3 year maturity. So the 3 year matches with your time horizon of 3 years. The 3 year matches with making your taxation more efficient, and the 3 year matches typically with the fixed deposit time horizon as well. These funds, today have a portfolio yield of around 7.5%. These funds have an expense on an average of 0.25 to 0.5%. So reduce that from the portfolio yield. Assuming a stable interest rate environment, uh, you should be able to have around 7% as your expected return, broadly tax free, assuming the benefit of indexation. All Both these funds have largely 100%, almost 100% triple instruments, and they invest exactly where all of you may be investing and are comfortable investing, uh, whether it is fixed deposits or tax bonds of public sector instruments. So this is for replacing your 3 year money and fixed deposit money. On the other hand, if you have some surpluses which you need to park aside right now for a holiday few months from now, or for making some purchase few months from now, one option is to keep it in savings account, which will fetch you 4%, in some cases 5 or 6%, because many banks are giving 6% also on savings account. But if you invest in a liquid fund, so we have a fund called DSP Liquidity Fund, or we have a fund called DSP Ultra Short Term Fund. These are replacements to your current account and savings account. The portfolio yield varies between 6.5 to 7%. Here you can invest in the dividend option, and at a 28% tax rate, it is still more efficient than the 33% tax rate that you otherwise pay directly. Another advantage of debt funds is, if you have short-term losses coming out of some other part of your investments, then you can offset them against short-term gains of debt funds. Then the entire return becomes tax-free, even if your time horizon is not 3 years and above. So I would encourage you to invest your savings account money in DSP Ultra Short-Term Plan, and your fixed deposit replacement for 3 year and above time horizon in DSP Short-Term Plan or DSP Banking and PSU Bond Fund. So these are the three investment options that I can recommend to you.
Right. Thank you, Kalpin. And so now that all of you have Kalpin's recommendations as well, you can log on to Kite and invest in mutual funds using your Kite account, right? All of our funds are now direct, so there's no distributor commissions as well. And yeah, that's about it. Kalpin, thanks a lot for your time, and the info that you gave us was, quite illuminating. So yeah,
Thank you so much to all of you for logging in. Good day.
yeah,
Bye.
yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.